Okay, so December 13th, Sam Bankman-Fried is back in the news quite a bit today, being arrested in the Bahamas and going to be extradited, I'm sure, to New York. A lot of cases being filed against him in the Southern District of New York. And I'm not going to really go over all of them in detail, but I wanted to look at the SEC, the complaint against him. Let me share my screen and then we will go into it. All right, so diverting customer funds. So here are copies of, so he's been charged by the Commodities Futures Trading, CFTC, the SEC, also a criminal indictment by the District Court, U.S. Attorney in Southern District of New York in Manhattan. So the one on the right is the indictment. It was unsealed, meaning it used to be sealed and private. Now it's not. So things like wire fraud on customers, conspiracy, wired fraud on lenders, wire fraud on commodities fraud, so securities fraud, money laundering. So some serious amounts of time that he could potentially get. And again, these are all allegations. So again, anyone is innocent until proven guilty. But I do want to talk about what is in here, because if you look at this is not, as Kevin O'Leary put on CNBC, he was basically defending him and trying to make it sound like, oh, this is, you never know. This is an entrepreneur and sometimes they get in over their head, they fail at things, and so we shouldn't hold it against him. No, this is not one of those cases. I've worked with entrepreneurs and startups for a long time, and if even half of what is being said in some of these complaints is true, he knew what he was doing from the start for years, and he set up this complex system and both misled people and outright lied, just flat out lied. So let's look at some of the things that he did in his structure on page 12 of the SEC's complaint against him for essentially securities fraud, defrauding investors. So the investors put about 1.8 billion into the actual company as equity to invest. And obviously, they're probably not going to see a dime on that or even a penny on any of that. But he raised capital a number of times in different rounds of funding, Series A, B, and C. And what he did was FTX, the platform, had relationships with his hedge fund Alameda, which were not disclosed. And some of them, and even though he would tell people there was nothing, they had the same terms as everybody else, which was not true. Alameda could basically have negative balances, and other customers, FTX, if they had a negative balance, they were required to basically cover that. But no, Alameda didn't have to. They had an open line of credit. So basically, there was this line of credit between Alameda and FTX that they could draw down. And also, Alameda was exempt from this liquidation feature that was supposed to protect the margin accounts and margin trading. So Alameda could fall below any kind of margin level, and that auto liquidation would not trigger like it would with every other customer. And they were doing this with basically having customer funds sent to Alameda, even though people were putting money into FTX trading platform, the customers, they would basically send their money to an account controlled or something by Alameda. So Alameda had all their money. Alameda was using their money to create a market for FTT tokens, create a market for the exchange, and basically prop up the value of FTT tokens and the value of FTX's exchange using people who put their money into FTX exchange or thinking that they did. And basically it was over at Alameda being used to create this house of cards and make it look like it had all this value. And basically all the money was over at Alameda, and they were using those funds for whatever they needed to, including a lot of these large kind of outrageous purchases that were being done personally and donating to campaigns with money that wasn't theirs. But in terms of the investors, so really what it comes down to, just reading through the whole thing, it's basically lack of disclosure on the security side. So the SEC is really looking at disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. He didn't disclose any of the risks. In fact, he went out of his way to say how safe his platform was and how safe his customers are and how, they have all these things in place. And the complaint outlines all of the things that he did and said to show everyone how safe it was, when it wasn't. Like, they weren't tracking anything, they had no protections in place, and basically they raised $1.8 million, claiming to be honest stewards of crypto, but continuously at the same time diverting FTX customer funds to Alameda, using those funds to grow his empire, using billions of dollars to make undisclosed private venture investments, political contributions, and real estate purchases. So not exactly solid stuff to do with your investors' money. And basically, he talked about the controls and risk management when he was out raising money. There was no such thing. And yeah, he even went on. They have basically examples from Twitter, and statements he made publicly about how safe everything was. And it wasn't. And so basically, the gist of the complaint from the SEC is there's no disclosure. There's no disclosure of risk. I mean, if you look at a prospectus, an offering memorandum for a securities offering to an investor, the biggest things you want is disclosure. You need to tell your investors what's going on, who you are, what you're doing, what the risks are, how you're going to make money, when you're going to get your money back. And he was basically telling everybody this is the safest thing ever, and we've got all these controls in place. So he was outright lying, not just misleading investors, lying and not disclosing any of the relationship. In fact, when asked, he said there is no relationship between Alameda and FTX. They're treated exactly the same as any other customer, which was a complete bold-faced lie. So he was just outright lying to everyone. And there was a related party transaction, tons of them, with related party transactions that were not disclosed. The risks of investing was not disclosed. Those related party transactions were not disclosed. All the relationships, interrelationships, were not properly disclosed. And just the general risk of investing in crypto that was really not disclosed. So it's, I don't know how far the SEC's complaint is going to go. It's probably going to be focused on the criminal complaint, and how much time he might do in jail. But basically the SEC, is asking that he give back all of the money that he earned and any profits, be barred from being involved in any kind of offer of securities ever again, never becoming an officer and director of any publicly traded company. So I have a feeling this is the least of his worries, but that's the gist of the SEC's complaint against him, and it's pretty shocking stuff. So again, it's innocent until proven guilty, but just line after line of everything about trying to hide the fact that their money was going to Alameda, that there was no loan between FTX and Alameda, or downplayed it, and there was no money going back and forth. The money wasn't actually deposited. Up to $8 billion in customer assets were actually put into Alameda versus FTX, which is where they were supposed to go. And then Alameda essentially lost all of it from there. So anyways, just some more interesting facts coming out, and I'm sure there's more to come.